Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Ashutosh Kumar. I am a professor of Indian politics in Punjab University. I also happen to be the principal coordinator of EPG Pathshala in the subject of political science. Today we are going to discuss a module which is titled Changing Federal Structure and State Politics. This module is a part of Indian Politics 2. As is evident from the title of the module, we are going to discuss about the nature of federal structure in India, and we are also going to discuss how the federal structure in India has undergone a change. So, in this module, we are going to see that how can we say that India is a federal polity. So, we would see that our constitutional order is like this, that India has all the features of a federal polity. India has a written constitution, India has dual government, India has also division of powers, and India has an independent judiciary, and the Supreme Court of India is the apex court, and our constitution defines the rights and the jurisdictions of both central government as well as the state government. In fact, there was never any doubt that what would be the structure, the political structure of India when India would become independent. There was no question of adopting a unitary model of polity just like Great Britain because of the extreme diversity, the plurality which we find in the case of Indian society. So because we have so much diversity and there are so many diversity on the basis of religion, region, language, caste and all, it was always inevitable that we would have a federal structure to fulfill the aspirations of different identity groups. So the constitution makers adopted a federal structure. But then we also talked about Indian model of federal structure. There is certain uniqueness about Indian federal polity. In India, we know that though we have a federal structure, but we have not followed the federal structure of United States of America or Canada or Australia or Switzerland, in the sense that in India we have given enormous power to the central government at the cost of the state government. If you see the 7th schedule, wide Article 246, we find that most important subjects have been kept under the jurisdiction of the central government. Likewise, in financial matters, most lucrative taxes are also under the jurisdiction of the central government. And then under the development planning model, when India became independent, you had 3 bodies, namely the Planning Commission, then the Finance Commission, which is a constitutional body, and then you had the National Development Council. These 3 bodies basically managed and controlled the economy of the country. They shaped the economic structure of the country for long years. In fact, even now, as you will know, Finance Commission is there, National Development Council is there, though the Yojana Ayog or this Planning Commission has been renamed as Niti Ayog. So the basic structure, the constitutional order, normative order remains the same. There have been many constitutional provisions in the Indian Constitution which heavily favors the central government. We can refer to the emergency provisions under Article 352, under Article 356, under Article 360. They gave enormous power to the central government to impose emergency of different type. There can be a national emergency in the part of the country, in the whole of the country. There can be a state emergency which can be imposed by the president on the written report of the governor, and then we can have also provision of a financial emergency. So initially this centralized federal structure or a strong center framework, as we are going to discuss in this module, was possible because the Congress party was the dominant party. It was winning election both at the state level as well as at the central level, and there was a kind of hegemonic position given to the Congress to the extent that the party system between 1947 to 67 was dubbed as Congress system by Rajni Kothari and one party dominant system by Morris Jones. However, as we know, 1967 election was a watershed election in the sense that the state level parties started coming up in a big way, and gradually there was a kind of challenge to the Congress as a hegemonic party. So then we have this, there has been a shift, and 1967 onwards we find that the Congress loses the social coalitional support base, and lots of parties with a lower caste support base came up in the name of social justice. And many state parties like Telugu Desam Party, Assam Gan Parishad, they emerged in 1980s. And then you had this Janata Party coming up in 1977, which defeated the Congress Party. Then after the decline of Janata Party and disintegration of Janata Party, Janata Dal came, Janata Dal Secular came, Rashtriya Janata Dal. So in the last 30 years, we have seen the emergence of the state level parties, regional parties, and decline of the national parties, which has created a great problem for the dominance of the national parties. Now, in this module, we are also going to discuss about the changed financial situation. In 1991, India adopted this new economic policy, and as we know, with the introduction of the new economic policy, market economy reforms, the role of the central state has gone down, and in fact now the states are becoming autonomous, and there has been a gradual withdrawal from the central state from managing the economy. So now there is a real cooperative federalism which is emerging under the present NDA regime. So that is something which we should always take into consideration. So overall, we can say that in this module we will be seeing that how in political terms and also in the financial terms the Indian state is becoming more and more federalized. Not only there is a federalization of party system, but also there is a greater decentralization of political power at the state level, and the state governments are becoming more and more important political actors as well as major economic actors. Now the state chief ministers go abroad and they seek foreign investments. They don't need the central government intervention, and as a result there have been certain fallouts. Like now we have this rise of rich state, poor state syndrome. Within the states also we have got the rich region, poor sub-regions. So in Maharashtra is a progressive state, but in Maharashtra you have Vidarbha, which is an underdeveloped state. So there is a demand for a separate statehood in Vidarbha. So these kind of problems are also coming up, which put up a challenge to the Indian federal structure. In political terms, of course, because of the dynamics of politics which it has evolved, because of the identity politics, because of the rise of the state level parties, rise of the state level leadership, gradually what has happened that the states have become major political actors, and state also have become major economic actors. So now there is a greater balance between the central state and the regional states in Indian polity. Federalism is a central principle of the Indian polity. Though there is no particular mention of India as a federation in the Indian Constitution, it has nonetheless forever remained an important tenet of the political picture. The Constitution defines India as a union of states. The Government of India, usually referred to as Union Government or the central governments, is the governing authority of a federal union of 29 states and 7 union territories. Political scientists have classified governments as unitary and federal on the basis of the nature of relation between the national central government and the regional state government. So it's basically the relationship between the government at the center and the government at the state level. Federalism as a form of government means a political system with at least two sets of government, one at the center and another at the level of the constituent states. It is a system based upon democratic rules and institutions in which the power to govern is shared between the union and the state government. This division of power is constitutional and both operate in their respective jurisdictions independently. A federal form of government, that is two sets of democratic institutions, stands in contrast with a unitary government in which a central authority holds the power. There is no constitutional division of power, and center is the authority that controls all power. State governments, as and where they exist in a unitary form of government, derive their power from the national government. In case of any clash between the center and the state, it is generally the center that has its way. Britain, Belgium, China, France, Italy, Japan, Norway, and soon they have unitary structure, while Australia, Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Russia, USA have federal form of government. The choice of a federal setup in India has been attributed to historical regions where it was considered important by both the British during the transfer of power as well as by the Indian leaders after the transfer of power. It is often argued that India suffered multiple foreign invasions due to a weak central commanding power, and because of this, a strong center was considered necessary. Where on one hand, India needed a strong center, on the other extreme was India's immense diversity, which demanded that the states be provided with considerable regional autonomy. The need to balance these two extremes India possessed resulted in India becoming a federating union. Article 1 of the Indian Constitution defines India as a union of states, wherein India is a union of 29 states and 7 union territories. Unlike the United States of America, where the federal and state governments function on dual constitution and citizens have dual citizenship, Indian Union and states, on the other hand, function under one constitution and Indians possess single citizenship, that of India. By and large, both the union and state governments function under one constitution which pictures a representative and responsible government at both levels. The word federalism as a federal system of governance is nowhere specifically mentioned in the Indian Constitution, but despite that, India's way of governance is federal in structure. Federalism is the division of power between the central and the state government by the scheme of the Constitution itself. Both governments are independent and autonomous in their sphere of powers. The division of power between the center and the state in India can be studied under three heads: legislative, administrative, and financial relations. Legislative relations. The federal division of power is clearly stated in the three lists in the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. They are union list, that's 99 subjects, state list 66 subjects. Originally, Indian list had 97 subjects. State list right now has 69 subjects, but originally it had 66 subjects. And the concurrent list now has 52 subjects, but originally it was only 47 subjects. Derived from the Australian Constitution, these lists clearly divide the powers vested on the Union and state. The Union list, also referred to as List 1, contains legislations on which the Union enjoys exclusive control. Of the total 99 subjects that are included in the Union list, the major ones are defense, banking, taxes, coinage, insurance, currency, union duties, foreign affairs and policy, etc. The state list, or the list 2, contains a total of 69 subjects, all of which are exclusive legislative powers of the state. Subjects like public order and police, state taxes and duties, agriculture, sanitation, local governments, forest, fisheries, public health form the part of the state list. The third list, called the concurrent list, contains 52 items which are powers vested both on the union as well as the state government. Matters such as economic and the social planning, criminal law and procedure, civil procedure, torts, trust, marriage, education, welfare and labor contracts fall within its purview. However, in case of a conflict, the union law prevails over the state law. Article 256 of the Constitution provides that the executive power of every state shall be so exercised so to ensure compliance with the laws made by the Parliament. Both union and state governments function separately in their administrative sphere without any interference in each other's domain. However, over a period of time, there has been some contentious issues that has had a significant bearing on the center-state relationship. The major issues are the treaty-making power of the Union, Article 253, President's rule, Article 356, and the role of the governor and use of parliamentary forces. All the three issues have had a considerable impact on the center-state relationship because these are tools in the hands of the union government which have been used and misused time and again to tilt the balance of power towards the center. Now let us refer to the financial relations. The financial relation between the union and the state government is another sore point in the center-state relationship. Sharing of revenues between the two sets of government has been a matter of conflict since long. The 7th schedule vests taxing powers both in the union list and the state list. The exclusive right to raise the most simple sources of revenue like the general income tax, corporate tax, excise duty, except on liquor and narcotics, custom duties are vested in the union government. The items listed in the state list include, to name a few, land revenue, tax or agricultural income, excise duties on alcoholic drinks and narcotic drinks, general sales tax, tax on motor vehicles, stamps, registration, entertainment and electricity. The point of tension between the two governments is the sharing of proceeds from the collected taxes. The states claim that the resources at their disposal are not commensurate with the huge expenditure that they are expected to incur in terms of developmental activities, while on the other hand, the union has access to extensive sources of revenue. Changing federal structure, a shift towards regionalization in the center-state relation. That would be the part of discussion in the next part. When we refer to the federal division of power as enshrined in the constitution, it has a strong bias towards the center. India's vast size, difference in various spoken languages and dialects, religions, races, caste, called for a strong center in order to maintain unity and integrity of the country. Again, a strong center was thought to be necessary to perform the huge responsibility of a modern welfare state and for the economic development of a newly independent country. A strong center with sufficient resources and authority, both political and economic, was therefore thought to be important. Due to all such reasons, India's polity was built with a stronger center. This order has, however, changed over the last 2 decades, beginning from the 1990s. Various developments took place which transformed the existing centralized system towards a more regionalized one. Though there has not been any change in the constitutional provisions regarding federalism and center-state relations, various federative processes and practices have stirred India from a strong central model towards a more federated polity and economy. In this section, we chart out the various changes that took place over the period, leading to a more regionalized polity in India and the ways in which the party system and the electoral processes have impacted upon the Indian federalism. It is here that we notice the surfacing of the new actors and institutional innovations, where states became the main theaters of politics and also of decentralized economy. States have become the principal arena for private investment in the post-liberalized era. We studied this in detail under 2 heads: emergence of states as principal political actors, and secondly, a shift from centralization, what Rudolph calls it, towards federal market economy. Now, if we consider the states emerging as important political actors, we must understand that India has been electorally dominated for long by the political Congress party after independence. But that is not the scenario now. Congress was at one time, for almost like 20 years, 1947 to 1967, was the undisputed leader, winning both national and assembly elections till the Janata Party challenged its overarching authority in 1977. The one-party dominant system was replaced after the 9th parliamentary elections in 1989 by a regionalized multi-party system and coalition government. The 1989 elections resulted in India's first hung parliament. Each of the 4 national elections since has been watershed in the sense that they have led to a coalition government in which the state-based parties have held key to the power at New Delhi. 2014 election was an aberration in the sense that one party got a clear-cut majority, but even there, the party BJP had chosen to remain in a coalitional arrangement because it may think it doesn't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha 2017 end. This has been one of the major shifts in the Indian politics, shift from one-party dominance to two-party system to a multi-party configuration where regional parties or state parties have come to play a major role. This has led to a greater level of recognition of state as the primary unit of study and to the emergence of state politics as an autonomous discipline whose study is now being considered essential for understanding of Indian politics. As already mentioned, Congress was on the overarching party in the years after independence. 1990s was the era marked by an overriding bipolar contest between Congress and the Bharatiya Janata Party and its corresponding alliances, the United Progressive Alliance and National Development Alliance, UPA and NDA. However, post this period, and especially after the Mandal era, India has witnessed a more multipolar contest, essentially with the rise of number of regional parties or state level parties. A simple count of the number of regional parties suggests an increase from 39 in 1952 to 362 in 2009. With its strong and entrenched support base, the state level parties have an important say in the formation of not only its respective state government but also as imperative partners in the national coalition. Their undisputable significance in the formation of the national coalition is reflected in the way regional parties dictate terms during government formation, allocation of ministries, and formulation of policies. Regional parties have been ruling many in South Indian states. Even the Hindi heartland states that used to swing together is now a political mosaic. That is what is being argued by Yogendra Yadav and Suhas Palshikar. The diversified multi-party era of politics has given rise to phenomena of divided government such that the two houses of the parliament and state legislatures are controlled by different sets of coalition government. As a result, intergovernmental negotiations and policy harmonization have acquired critical importance. The traditional forums for these negotiations are the Development Council, the Inter-State Council, whose importance has been increasing in the last few years. The importance of regional parties is evident in the fact that no political party has been able to win majority of the seats in Lok Sabha during the last 5 national elections since 1989. As a result, the country has witnessed coalition government in which dependence on regional party has been very high. As I said, that 2014 was the first election after 31 years when one party could get clear-cut majority in the Lok Sabha. And there also it doesn't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha. Sanjay Kumar tells us that regional parties over the last several elections have polled nearly 1/3 of the votes. On the other hand, the vote share of the National Party has gone low in a corresponding manner. The Congress has suffered the steepest decline from 48% vote polled in the party favor during the 1984 Lok Sabha election to 28.6% during the 2009 Lok Sabha election, and in 2014 election it further went down to 24%. Yogendra Yadav and Suhas Palshikar mentioned that if we compare the voter turnout of the Lok Sabha election of the last 2 decades with the assembly elections held in the same period, we can clearly say bigger numbers came out to vote in the assembly election as compared to the national election. This trend is visible in all states, with Bihar being the only exception. And in fact, the voting in a higher percentage in the lower election is something which is unique to India, because unlike the Western countries, because in the Western countries, higher you go up, you have a higher voting percentage. Rudolphs, in their article published in January 2002, have argued that with the rise in the coalition government, the growing importance of regional parties and the shift towards multi-party system has undone the centralizing thrust of the 1950 Federal Constitution. They cite the reduced use of Article 356 by the majority party at the center to remove some state government as an example. With state-based parties now holding the balance of power in New Delhi, unrestricted invocation of Article 356 time and again has become a thing of the past, no doubt aided by the judicial ruling and judgments. They also draw a comparison between Indian policies and Italian and Israeli politics, where smaller political parties can and do hold national governments hostage in order to advance their own narrow partisan agenda. We are aware of the way Jayalalitha hijacked the coalition with the threat to bring down the Vajpayee government. The Varni and Valveer Arora used the term federalization to denote the end of UN party dominance, the abundance of political parties, and the consequent reconfiguration of the party system. A distinct territorialization of political parties with regions of strength and weaknesses is a significant feature of the new party system. They also refer to this as regionalization or decentering. The emergence of a competitive multi-party system has ensured that no one party controls the monopoly over power, and this in turn has considerably transferred the federal relationship in India. Apart from the mounting importance of the regional parties, the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment have also decentralizing process. Though the local self-government continues to be under the jurisdiction of the state list, with the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment, they have acquired a constitutional status With the gaining of constitutional status, local self-government have seen more regularly in terms of elections, financial allocation from both the union and the state government. This has also granted them relatively greater autonomy in effective functioning. Post 1989, regional parties have changed the face of the national politics. Since 1989, the centralizing tendencies of the Indian Federation is being undermined, thereby leading to the emergence of a changed federal structure. Within a changed federal structure, states have become an important stage for all kinds of political dramas to unfold, and the politics and electoral scenario has become more regionalized. In the heydays of Nehru and Congress, India was primarily a centralized economy, and any kind of industrialization was guided by the permit license Raj. An elaborate regulatory arrangements concentrated power into the hands of central agencies such as Director General of Foreign Trade, Import and Export Control Board, and the various licensing committees of the Ministry of Industry. The star of the command economy and the permit license Raj were the bureaucrats, administrators, economists, and other experts who were helping Prime Minister Nehru build a modern industrial economy. Industry and industrialization were completely under the center's custody, and though a meticulous licensing structure, it regulated any investment by private firms. Nehru, as the chairman of the Planning Commission, imagined, and with big dams, heavy industries, and modern industrialization, Indian state would occupy the commanding heights of the economy. Asima Sinha, in her article, The Changing Political Economy of Federalism in India, a historical institutionalist approach that was published in 2004, has mentioned that the Indian economy in 1978 was dominated by the public sector, which controlled 80% of the total investment, while foreign investment as a share of the total investment was extremely low at around 0.6%. In contrast, in 1998, the public sector constituted approximately 40% of the total investment, with foreign investment stood at approximately 16%. The economic structure was so centralized that the vertical dependence of the states on the center to meet the gap between revenues and expenditures led to almost complete reliance of the states on central monetary transfers. Central institutions like Finance Commission and Planning Commission were allocating revenue and budgetary support to the various states. This centralized command in fiscal matters, however, changed hands around the year 1991 with the advent and acceptance of liberal reforms in our economy. The post-1991 era is marked by changes in terms of center-state economic relations. Economic liberalization, coupled with the dismantling of the permit license Raj and an increasing dependence on markets, have encouraged the emergence of the federal market economy. India's economic liberalization and globalization has transformed center-state along with the center-state market relations in a very big way, and this has been commented upon by Rudolph and Rudolph, Rao and Singh, and also Singh and Srinivasan. Rudolph, in fact, argues that the economic liberalization is only one part of the story. An equally important reason has been the clear decline in centrally sponsored public investment. This has not only abridged the central government's financial control but also opened up new fields of enterprise for innovative state governments. Private investment became the new engine of growth, and states obtained a new degree of economic sovereignty, as now they were in a position to look towards the market to meet the resource demand. The Asima Sinha seems to agree with Rudolph in the sense that she states that with the newly gained economic sovereignty, the states could now look towards the market, both international as domestic, to meet the demand of the capital. She states that with the abolition of the centrally controlled license Raj, the foreign direct investment and foreign technology agreement were radically changed. These reforms not only have freed industrialists but also the states to approach the private sector, both foreign and domestic, directly in search of investment. These amendments in the regulatory framework has added to unintended decentralization in power and authority in fiscal matters. The central control towards a more decentralized system, however, had its own problem. On one hand, as Sinha argues, devolution of authority has led to decentralization of expenditure, but on the other hand, this has accompanied with a corresponding decentralization in revenue sharing mechanism. The result of such an imbalance has been much more precarious fiscal health of most of the states which are not considered progressive states. There was a soaring desire for continued regional investment, and this, compounded with a declining central transfer, has created an environment of apparent regional disparities across states. India has seen an increasing trend of growth rate disparities across the states. For example, on one extreme was Bihar, whose domestic product growth rate in 1990s was as low as 2.7% per year, and on the other extreme was Gujarat, whose growth rate was 9.6% annually, more than 3.5 times greater than Bihar. Such an imbalance in growth rates has given rise to extreme regional disparities. Renowned scholars of federalism have noted that the decentralized fiscal structure post-liberalization has led to an era of competitive federalism. Competitive federalism is characterized, among other things, by a discord among the states for international investors and mobile sources of capital. According to Asima Sinha, this competition among states were competing even in the pre-reform era. However, what has changed from the pre-liberalization era in the recent times is the nature of this competition. In the pre-liberalization phase, this competition was more vertical. Most competitive policies were planned with a view to get crucial resources from the center, whether in the form of location of private sector factories or public sector resources. States were also competing with each other for securing centrally sponsored public sector projects. West Bengal and Tamil Nadu have been prominent examples, while there are other states which have tried to redirect the central licensing system for locating private sector projects in their own region, Gujarat and Maharashtra. In the post-1991 era, the form of this competition changed. It was now characterized more by a horizontal competition wherein the states competed among themselves. This horizontal competition is more symmetric as it affects a wider set of states than before and encourages policy diffusion among many states. In order to attract investors, the game of number and statistics is played by most states, by way of which it wants to portray to have attracted the highest share of investment, and every state wants to become the magnet for the foreign direct investment as well as domestic investment. Intense competition across the state has even led to a direct agreement between the international agencies or investors and the state governments bypassing the central government. From 1998 onwards, the World Bank has made direct agreement for structural adjustment packages with Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Uttar Pradesh. For the restructuring of its power sector, Orissa received a loan of US $350 million directly from the World Bank. Similarly, private companies sign separate contracts with states and even conform to specific regional context and political dynamics in different states. Gujarat represents a state-led model of development. It focuses on aggressive attraction of non-resident Indians, Gujaratis, and mobilization. Investment from other agencies, organizations, though steady, and continuous institutional reforms and government action on a range of industrial policy fronts. The fiscal relationship between the center and the state thus has changed, with the balance shifting towards states. The centralizing tendencies of the pre-1991 economy have been slowly loosening up, and the states are gaining prominence in fiscal matter. This, however, does not mean that the central government has no control over the state's fiscal policies. With the fading of Nehruvian centralized command economy, the role of the central government has changed from an interventionist to regulatory. Rudolph has mentioned that far from losing control over the state's investment policies, direct intervention of the center affecting both the polity and the economy is being replaced by regulation. The 1991 economic liberalization has led to the abandonment of the license permit, quota Raj, and central planning, but federal regulatory agencies remain active in monitoring markets for goods, services, and capital to ensure that they perform competitively and effectively. It shows up the transformation of the fiscal federal structure from a highly centralized economy to a more federal economic structure. In this module, we saw that how the federal structure of India has undergone a change and how the states have become more and more autonomous politically as well as economically. And that has brought into focus the nature of state politics. In fact, in today's India, if we want to understand the Indian politics in all its nuances, then we need to focus on the state level politics, because most important developments take place at the state level. And because of this coalition government and the decline of the national parties, with the exception of Bharatiya Janata Party, all the other national parties have declined. You can see, like Communist Party of India, Marxist, is confined to 3 states, Tripura, West Bengal and Kerala. In fact, in West Bengal, they are not doing very well of late. So as a result, what has happened that the state parties are forming the government, or they are also a stakeholder at the central national level. This is very clear because since 1991 till 2014, no party could get a clear-cut majority at the center in the Lok Sabha. There are many states where we have a coalition government. There are many states where even the national parties, polity-wide parties like BJP, they are a second junior partner to a state party. Punjab is a very good example. BJP, which is a national party, is a junior partner of Shiromani Akali Dal, which is a state level party. That tells you how the politics of India has undergone a transition, how the states have become more and more important. In the economic arena also, you can see that some states have done so well, whereas other states are not really doing well. So, and every state has got its own distinct identity and its distinct economy. For example, Punjab has one sector economy. It's primarily out and out agricultural economy, whereas a state like Maharashtra or is, for example, Gujarat thrives in the manufacturing sector, in the industrial sector. So every state has got its own autonomy, its own distinctiveness, and that's why the study of politics or economy in India cannot be possible if we do not take state as the unit of analysis. So as such, because of the changing federal structure of India, the state politics as an arena of study has become very, very important.